Life has its cruel ironies. Sometimes you have to fall completely to be lifted for the first time. There are encounters that don't ask for permission, that happen at the exact moment two wounded hearts cross paths, one seeking redemption, the other needing to be seen. And so, between the cold marble of a silent mansion and the invisible weight of lives in pain, two souls touched without warning. She trying to survive her own past. He trying to forget his own future, but destiny, when it decides, doesn't wait. And in that instant, everything changed. Subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories. The floor came up before Clara could understand what was happening. 1 second, she was clutching the cleaning cloth tightly, focused on making the marble shine as she'd been taught. The next, her legs gave out, the world spun in slow motion and everything went black. Her slender frame collapsed in the east corridor of Montevero Mansion, where silence used to be the only witness. But not that day. Miguel Montevero was crossing the corridor, his mind miles away, lost in bitter thoughts about pointless meetings and unfulfilled promises, until he heard the thud of someone falling. He turned on impulse, and that's when he saw her. A young woman passed out on the floor, so small she looked like she'd been left there by mistake. Dark hair fanned out on the marble, fingers still clenched around a damp cloth, her face too pale for mere exhaustion. Miguel knelt beside her without thinking. He carefully touched her wrist, feeling a faint but living pulse. Something inside him tightened, a strange, almost forgotten sensation, as if he were holding something too fragile to exist in his hands. "Hey, can you hear me?" Nothing. He lifted her into his arms gently, surprised by her almost non-existent weight. He carried her to the nearest sofa, settled her carefully, and went to get water. When he returned, her eyes finally fluttered open. Clara blinked slowly, confused, trying to understand where she was. The first thing she saw was a male face leaning over her, concerned, handsome in a way that seemed unreal. For a second, she thought she was still unconscious, dreaming. "Are you okay?" His voice was deep but soft. She tried to sit up, but he held her shoulder with a gentle firmness. "Easy. Breathe first." Clara obeyed, still dazed. Then the memory hit her like a tidal wave. The job, the heat, the dizziness she'd ignored because she couldn't afford to lose this job. She tried to get up again, this time with more urgency. I need to get back to work. Sorry, You fainted," Miguel interrupted, and there was something firm in his voice that made her stop. "You're not cleaning anything now." Her eyes finally met his, truly met them, and it was in that instant that something shifted, though neither of them could name it. Clara saw a man who shouldn't be there, kneeling beside a cleaner, holding a glass of water as if it were the most important thing in the world. Miguel saw a woman who seemed to carry the weight of the universe on her shoulders, yet who was still trying to get up, to apologize, to go back to work. There was a silent strength in her that completely disarmed him. "Drink." He extended the glass, and this time it wasn't a request. Clara took it, her hands trembling slightly. She drank slowly, feeling the cool liquid slide down her dry throat. When she finished, she looked at him again and realized he hadn't moved. He was still there, watching her with an attention she wasn't used to receiving. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice weak. "Sorry to be a bother." "You weren't a bother," Miguel replied, and for the first time in months, he wasn't lying. Silence. A silence that shouldn't have been comfortable, but it was. "Did you eat today?" he asked, though he already knew the answer by the way she averted her gaze. "I forgot." He sighed, but not with impatience, with something that sounded like genuine concern. "Stay here. I'll have some food brought over." "You don't have to, Stay," he repeated, softer this time, but equally firm. And then he did something that surprised them both. He touched her hand, just for a second, before standing up and leaving the room. Clara remained there alone, her heart beating with a strange rhythm that had nothing to do with fainting. She looked at her own hand, still feeling the warmth of that touch, too brief to mean anything, yet too long to be forgotten. On the other side of the door, Miguel leaned against the wall, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. What was that? He had sworn he wouldn't get involved with anyone, that he wouldn't feel anything beyond polite indifference. But holding that woman in his arms, seeing the way she tried to get up even when she was weak, something within him awakened, something dangerous, something he couldn't allow. But as he walked down the corridor to get help, an uncomfortable truth settled in his chest. It was already too late to pretend that hadn't happened. Before continuing, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for heartwarming stories every day. When Miguel returned with a tray of food, Clara was sitting, her hands clasped in her lap, her gaze lost in the window. She turned as she heard him enter, and for the first time she offered a small, shy but genuine smile. "You didn't have to." "I know," he interrupted, placing the tray beside her, "but I wanted to." And in that instant, under the soft afternoon light filtering through the heavy curtains, something began to exist between them. It wasn't love yet. It wasn't explicit desire. It was something subtler, deeper. It was the silent acknowledgement of two wounded souls who, unintentionally, had just found each other. In the following days, Clara tried to keep her distance. She arrived early, cleaned in silence, avoided the corridors where she knew Miguel might be. But Montevero Mansion was too large to hide secrets and too small to avoid encounters. Every time she turned a corner, he was there, not on purpose, or at least that's what they both pretended to believe. A hurried good morning exchanged, a glance that lasted half a second too long, a silence that said more than any words. Clara knew she couldn't get distracted. That job was all she had, the only thing separating her from returning to the streets, from losing the small room she shared with two strangers, from giving up for good. She couldn't afford to feel. She couldn't afford to be seen. But Miguel saw her. He saw the way she cleaned with excessive care, as if apologizing to the furniture for touching it. He saw how she bit her lip when she was concentrating, how she sighed softly when she thought she was alone. He saw the sadness she carried like a second skin, so close it seemed part of her, and the more he saw, the more he wanted to understand. One afternoon, he found her in the garden, sitting on a stone bench during her break. She held a piece of bread in her hands, eating slowly, gazing at the horizon as if expecting something or someone to appear. "May I?" Miguel asked, gesturing to the space beside her. Clara looked up, surprised, and nodded, though her body tensed slightly. He sat down but said nothing. They simply stayed there, sharing the silence, looking at the same horizon. After a while, she spoke first. "Why do you do that?" "Do what?" "Be nice to me." Miguel turned to her, confused. "Why wouldn't I be?" Clara smiled, but it was a sad, tired smile. "Because people like you don't usually see people like me." The words stung more than he expected, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. He knew that at another point in his life, he would have walked past her without noticing, just another employee, another nameless face. But now, "I see you," he said, simple as that. And Clara didn't know what to say because no one had ever said that to her before, not like that. Not as if they genuinely cared. They stayed there, side by side, until her break ended and she had to return to work. But before she left, she turned to him one last time. "Thank you," she murmured, "for seeing me." And then she was gone, leaving Miguel alone in the garden, his heart beating with a rhythm he no longer recognized. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay awake, thinking of her words, of the way she smiled as if she didn't believe she deserved it. He thought about his own life, the wasted years trying to be what others expected, the marriage that fell apart because it was never real, the loneliness he chose as punishment. And for the first time in a long time, Miguel wondered if it was still possible to start over, if it was still possible to feel. Clara, in the small room she shared with two other women, didn't sleep either. She stared at the cracked ceiling, thinking of the man who saw her when no one else did. His touch, his genuine concern, the way he treated her as if she mattered. She knew it was dangerous. She knew she couldn't get attached, but her heart, stubborn, had already begun to feel what her head begged her to ignore. And on opposite sides of the city, two wounded hearts began to beat in unison, unaware that fate had already decided the next step. Reality soon imposed itself. The Montevero mansion wasn't just a house, it was a universe with its own rules, invisible hierarchies, and judgmental glances that didn't need words. Mrs. Amelia, the housekeeper, was the first to notice. Nothing escaped her keen eyes, trained by decades of service. She saw the way Miguel paused to talk to Clara, how he left discreet notes asking if she was okay, how his gaze searched for her in the hallways, and she did not approve. "Mr. Miguel," she said one morning, with the polite but firm tone she used when she wanted to be heard, "I need to speak about the new employee." Miguel looked up from his documents, trying to appear casual. "Clara, is there a problem?" "Nothing with her work," Amelia replied, choosing her words carefully. "But I've noticed closeness, and I believe it's my duty to remind you that this can cause misunderstandings." Miguel felt irritation rise, but he controlled it. "I was simply being kind to her. I don't see a problem with that." "Kindness is one thing. Special attention is another, though," the housekeeper retorted. "You know how people talk. And this young woman, she already has a difficult life. She doesn't need more complications." The words hit their mark. Miguel knew Amelia was right, but that only angered him more. "Thank you for your concern," he said, ending the conversation with cold politeness. But the message had been delivered. Meanwhile, Clara was facing her own demons. The debts continued to grow, the interest suffocating any hope of paying them off. She worked 2 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, ate once a day if she was lucky. And now she had to deal with something even more dangerous: hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would see her as more than a survivor, that there was genuine kindness in the world, that she deserved something beyond pain. But hope was a luxury, and Clara couldn't afford luxuries. It was on one of those heavy afternoons that everything almost fell apart. Clara was cleaning the library when she heard voices in the hallway. She recognized Miguel's immediately. The other was feminine, cold, sharp. "You've always been good at collecting charity projects, Miguel," the woman said, "and the venom was palpable. But you've never been good at keeping them." "Mariana, don't start." His voice was tired. "I'm just reminding you of the obvious," she continued. "You like to play savior, but when the novelty wears off, you abandon them, like you abandoned me." "Our marriage ended because you chose someone else," Miguel retorted, his patience wearing thin. "Don't try to rewrite history. And you think this cleaning lady will make you happy?" Her laugh was bitter. "You're pathetic." Clara felt her blood run cold. Every word was a sharp blade cutting at the hope that had barely begun to grow. She wasn't a project. She wasn't charity. But that's how the world saw them, and maybe that's how Miguel saw her too. She finished cleaning in silence, her hands trembling, her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. When she left the library, she ran into Miguel in the hallway. He smiled when he saw her, but she just lowered her head and walked past. "Clara," he called, confused. She didn't stop. Miguel stood there, not understanding what had happened, but feeling that something important had just broken. And the worst part was not knowing how to fix it. That night, Clara decided she needed to protect herself. that she needed to stop believing in fairy tales. People like her didn't have happy endings. People like her just survived, but her heart, stubborn and wounded, still whispered his name in the dark. The distance Clara tried to create lasted exactly 3 days, not because she gave up, but because Miguel didn't let her. He wasn't invasive, he wasn't pushy, he was just there. Every morning, a fresh bottle of water where she started her work. A simple note, "Don't forget to drink water, M." Sometimes a piece of fruit. Sometimes nothing more than a genuine good morning that made her pause and look at him for longer than she should. "Why don't you give up?" Clara asked one afternoon, tired of fighting herself. Miguel was in the music room, leafing through old sheet music. He looked up, surprised by her presence. "Give up what?" "This," she gestured vaguely between them. "Whatever this is." He put the sheet music aside and took a few steps towards her. "You want me to give up?" Clara opened her mouth to say yes, to lie, to protect herself. But the words wouldn't come, because no, she didn't want to, and admitting that, even just to herself, was terrifying. Miguel saw the hesitation, saw the internal struggle, and understood everything. "I'm scared too," he confessed, his voice low. "I'm afraid of feeling something I shouldn't, of being selfish, of hurting you unintentionally, but..." He stopped, took a deep breath. "But when I'm near you, it's the first time in years I feel truly alive." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with all they couldn't say. Clara felt tears burning her eyes, fighting to hold them back. "You don't know me," she whispered. "You don't know where I come from, what I've done, what I carry." "Then tell me," Miguel replied, taking another step. "Let me get to know you." And that's when Clara realized he wasn't offering salvation. He was offering companionship, and maybe that was even more dangerous because it was exactly what she wanted most. That afternoon, sitting on the floor of the music room, Clara told him. She told him about her difficult childhood, about the mother she lost too soon, about the mistakes she made trying to survive. She told him about the debts, about the constant fear, about the days she wasn't sure if it was worth going on. Miguel listened to it all without judgment, without pity. He just listened. And when she finished, exhausted and vulnerable, he did the only thing that mattered. He stayed. "Thanks for trusting me," he said, as simple as that. And then, on an impulse that surprised them both, he touched her face, his thumb wiping away a tear that had escaped. The touch was brief, but it was everything. It was the moment they both understood this was no longer just kindness or curiosity. It was something much bigger. Clara closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel that touch for a second before pulling away. "I need to go," she murmured, her voice trembling. Miguel nodded, though everything in him screamed for her to stay. "I know." She stood up, walked to the door, but stopped at the threshold without turning around. "Miguel?" "Yeah, thanks for staying." And then she was gone, leaving him alone in the room, his heart pounding too hard, and the absolute certainty that he was falling in love with her. On the other side of the door, Clara leaned against the wall, breathing deeply, trying to control the whirlwind of emotions, because she knew too. She knew she was falling in love, and she knew that was the most dangerous thing that could happen. But the heart doesn't ask permission. And in that moment, for the first time in her life, Clara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be loved. What came next was inevitable. The world doesn't forgive those who dare to dream above their station. 3 days after their conversation in the music room, Clara received a call that froze her blood. The voice on the other end was a debt collector, but this time there was no negotiation. There was a threat. If she didn't pay within 48 hours, he would go after her only living relative, her grandmother, who lived out in the country and knew nothing. Clara hung up the phone, her hands shaking. The amount was impossible, even working day and night for months. She couldn't come up with it. And now, for the first time, there was someone she didn't want to lose. But how could she explain this to Miguel without sounding like she was taking advantage of him? The answer was simple. She couldn't. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She decided to disappear, finish out the month, collect her pay, and vanish before things got any more complicated. Before he found out the truth about who she really was. Before his gaze changed. But Clara underestimated one thing. Miguel was also fighting his own battles. His ex-wife had reappeared, not out of love, but for personal gain. His family was pressuring him to reconsider. After all, Mariana came from a good family, had the right connections. She was the sensible choice. And Miguel, tired of fighting, tired of disappointing everyone, had almost caved. Almost. Until he saw Clara in the garden, alone, crying silently, trying to compose herself before going back to work. And he realized that sensible was the last thing he wanted. He approached slowly, without making a sound, but she felt his presence. "Are you going to send me away?" Clara asked without looking, her voice choked. "Why would I do that?" "Because that's what everyone does," she replied, finally turning to him. Her eyes were red, her face streaked with tears. "When they realize I'm not worth the trouble," Miguel felt something break inside him. "Do you really think that's how I see you?" "I don't know how you see me," she whispered. "And maybe it's better that way." "Look at me," he asked, his voice firm but gentle. Clara obeyed, and what she saw in his eyes disarmed her completely. There was no pity, there was no condescension. There was pain, desire, fear, and something that looked a lot like love. "I don't know what I'm doing," Miguel confessed. "I don't know if I'm the right person for you, if I can give you what you deserve. But I know that when you're near, I breathe better. When you smile, even if it's just a little, my whole day changes. And when you cry..." He stopped, swallowing the lump in his throat. "When you cry, I feel like the whole world is wrong." Clara's tears fell harder, but this time they weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of being seen, of being felt. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I'm afraid you'll find out who I really am and realize I'm not enough." "You're already more than enough," Miguel replied, and it wasn't an empty promise. It was absolute truth. He took a step forward. She didn't back away. He raised his hand, touched her face as he had before, but this time it wasn't brief. It was a touch that said everything words couldn't. "Let me stay," he asked. "Let me be here with you, just as you are." And Clara, tired of running, tired of being afraid, simply nodded. They stood there, embracing in the garden, as the sun set and the world kept spinning. They hadn't solved anything, the debt still existed, the family pressure was still there, the social abyss between them remained vast. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Because sometimes, loving is choosing to stay even when everything tells you to run, and they both finally chose to stay. What Clara didn't tell him that afternoon in the garden was about the call, the deadline, the threat. She kept it to herself, just as she had always kept her pain, as if carrying it alone was the only way she knew to exist. But secrets have a life of their own, and this one was about to explode. 2 days later, Miguel found Clara passed out again. Not in the hallway this time, but in the small back room where the employees kept their belongings. She'd pulled a double shift, ignored the hunger, ignored her body screaming for rest because she needed the extra cash. When he found her, something inside him snapped. "This can't keep going on," he said when she woke, lying on the couch in her own living room, him sitting beside her, his hand gripping hers tightly. "I'm fine," Clara lied, trying to sit up. "You're not," Miguel countered, and there was anger there, but not at her. at the world, at the situation, at the injustice. You're killing yourself, Clara. Why? She was silent, her gaze fixed on her own hands. Because I don't have a choice. There's always a choice, he insisted. Not when your family is in danger. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Miguel froze. What do you mean? And then, because she couldn't take it anymore, because she was exhausted from carrying it all alone, Clara told him. She told him about the debts, about the collectors, about the threat to her grandmother. She told him, crying, ashamed, expecting him to judge her, to realize she was too much of a burden. But Miguel just squeezed her hand tighter. How much? Clara blinked, confused. What? How much do you owe? Miguel, no. How much? He repeated, firm. She told him the amount and saw something shift on his face. It wasn't pity. It was determination. I'll take care of it. No! Clara shot up, her heart pounding. No, you won't. I don't want your charity. I don't want... It's not charity, Miguel interrupted, standing up too. It's love. The world stopped. The words hung in the air between them, heavy, real, impossible to take back. I love you, Miguel repeated, and this time there was no hesitation. I know it's crazy, I know it's too fast, I know everything's against us, but I love you, Clara. And I'm not going to stand here watching you destroy yourself when I can help. She was crying again, but they were different tears. You don't owe me anything, she whispered. I know, he replied, stepping closer, cupping her face in his hands. But I want to give you everything anyway. Clara closed her eyes, feeling his touch, his truth, his love. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved it too. I love you too, she confessed, her voice breaking, and it terrifies me. Miguel smiled, sad and hopeful at the same time. Welcome to the club. And then finally he kissed her. It wasn't a fairy tale kiss, perfect and cinematic. It was a desperate kiss, tear-soaked, full of fear and hope, of promises they didn't know if they could keep, but it was theirs, true, real. When they broke apart, they rested their foreheads against each other, breathing together, trying to figure out what to do next. We'll figure it out, Miguel whispered, together. And Clara, for the first time in a long time, believed. But on the other side of the door, Mariana had heard everything, and the smile that curved her lips was venomous. She knew exactly how to use that information to her advantage. The storm was just beginning. The blow came from where Clara least expected it. Not from the collectors, not from the debts, but from the very society she feared so much. Mariana worked fast, a word here, an insinuation there, and soon the entire mansion, the whole city's elite, knew that Miguel Montevero was involved with the housekeeper. But they didn't stop there. They twisted the story, turned love into opportunism, turned Clara into a villain. The rumors reached her ears on a cold morning. She's using him. Women like that only want money. He was always too naive for his own good. Clara read the messages, heard the whispered comments, felt the weight of the stares, and she decided to do the only thing she knew, protect Miguel, even if it meant destroying herself. She left a letter, took her last paycheck, paid off what she could of the debts, and disappeared. She didn't tell anyone, didn't say goodbye, she just left, leaving behind the only place she'd ever felt seen, the only man she'd ever truly loved. The letter read, Miguel, I'm not good with words, but I need to try. You gave me something I never had, the feeling that I mattered, that I was more than my mistakes, more than my circumstances. You made me believe, even if for a short time, that I deserved to be loved. But the world doesn't let us forget where we come from. And I can't be the reason you lose everything. I can't be the mistake that haunts you. So I'm leaving, not because I don't love you, but because I love you too much to stay. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Always yours, Clara. When Miguel found the letter on the bed where she'd slept, something inside him died and was reborn at the same time. The part that was afraid, that hesitated, that cared about others' opinions, died. And something stronger was reborn, the absolute certainty that he wouldn't let her go. He left the mansion without telling anyone, left meetings waiting, ignored calls from his family. He searched every place she'd mentioned, every corner of the city where she might be. And when he finally found her 3 days later in a tiny hostel in the suburbs, her eyes red from crying, he said nothing. He just held her. Clara tried to pull away, tried to push him, tried to say he was making a mistake. But Miguel held firm and didn't let her go. "You think I care what they say?" he said, his voice rough. "You think I care about money, about my name, about anything that isn't you? Miguel, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he interrupted, making her look at him. "I understand that you're scared. I understand that you think you don't deserve it. But I'm not giving up on you. Ever." "They'll destroy you," Clara cried. "They'll take everything." "Then let them take it," Miguel replied, and there was no doubt in his voice. "Because without you, I have nothing that matters." The words broke the last barrier Clara had built. She collapsed in his arms, crying out all she had held inside, all the pain, all the fear, all the hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel. And Miguel stayed. He held her as she fell apart, whispered promises he intended to keep, loved her with the intensity of someone who finally understood what truly matters. "I'm not going to let you go through this alone," he said when her tears finally ceased. "No matter what comes, we face it together." Clara looked at him, saw the determination, the love, the certainty. And for the first time, she believed that maybe love could truly win. "Together," she repeated, a whisper laden with promise. "Together," he confirmed. And there, in that simple room, without luxury, without glamour, just two wounded hearts who decided to heal together, love won. Not because the world had changed, but because they had chosen to fight. 6 months later, life was different, not perfect, but real. Miguel faced his family, lost some connections, gained others. He learned that true wealth wasn't in bank accounts, but in the eyes of those who truly see you. Clara paid off her debts with his help, not as charity, but as a partnership. She went back to school, started dreaming again. They didn't live in a mansion. They chose a simple apartment where they could build something that was theirs alone, where the past wouldn't weigh so heavily and the future was a blank canvas waiting to be painted. There were still tough days. Days when Clara woke up thinking she didn't deserve this. Days when Miguel wondered if he was doing enough. But they learned that love isn't the absence of doubt, but a daily choice to stay, even when it's hard. One Sunday afternoon, they were on their small balcony drinking coffee when Clara said, "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real." Miguel smiled, pulling her closer. "It's real. You're real. We're real." "What if I hadn't fainted that day?" she asked, half joking, half serious. "I would have found another way," he replied without hesitation, "because souls that need to find each other always do." Clara laughed, resting her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in a long time she felt peace. Their love wasn't a fairy tale. It didn't have a perfect, bow-tied ending, but it was true, built on pain and healing, on vulnerability and strength. It was the kind of love that transforms, that heals, that endures. And there, on that simple balcony with warm coffee and the afternoon sun, two wounded hearts understood they had finally found where they belonged, with each other. And that's how two wounded hearts discovered that love. When it's true, always finds a way. And you, what did you think of this story? What moment touched you the most? Leave it here in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way you'll never miss our love stories.